Hello, this is Deanne from Small But Kind and Mighty, and today I would like to share with you some thoughts, ideas, tips, hacks for things that you can try if you find yourself crocheting too tightly. If you're a crocheter or you're interested in crocheting, and my thoughts and ideas resonate with you, then my contact information is in the description box below. Please don't hesitate to reach out, as I love to talk with people and see if there's anything that I can do that would help them with their crochet journey. As is often the case, one of my students was the inspiration for this video. She is a self-taught crocheter and she wanted some ideas for how she could better control the tension within her crochet fabric. When asked about this, the first thing I always come back to is the mind-body fabric connection. If your mind and body aren't relaxed, then your fabric won't be either. Now, you may be wondering, okay, but don't I crochet to relax? And yes, it is true that crochet has a beneficial impact on your heart rate. It lowers blood pressure, it lowers cortisol within our bloodstream. So yes, crochet is a really good way to access relaxation. However, if you want to set yourself up for success in this regard, it's a really good idea to take a few minutes to relax your mind and body and set your intention regarding your upcoming crochet experience. So do whatever works for you in this regard, whether it's like doing some deep breathing, progressive muscle relaxation, whatever body calming activities you find helpful. I like to light a candle, so I've got one here. Can you see? Yes, okay. So the scent encourages me to breathe more deeply, and the light of the candle I also find is a really useful visual cue. If I find myself ruminating or planning or stressing about something while I'm crocheting, then looking at the candle is a way for me to focus more on being present and reminding myself of what my intention was regarding my crocheting. So, what's my intention regarding our time together? Well, you're obviously more than welcome to set an intention of your own that works for you, but mine is going to be to relax sufficiently so that I can access my inner Fool. Why the Fool? Well, April Fool's Day is coming up. The Fool always reminds me of spring. This candle is called the Fool. I'm doing it wrong. There we go. And that's after the Major Arcana card in the tarot. And this is my yarn tarot card for the Fool. And I think he is rather lovely. He's got his project bag full of yarn, forward facing, the sun is shining, and he is ready to move forward and create things, learn new things, experience new things. So, for me, what could be more relaxing than embracing the present and opening my heart and mind to whatever lays ahead? Having a learning mindset and reminding myself that there is wisdom in foolishness. Shakespeare loved fools, and there's lots of fools in his plays and lots of commentary on fools and foolishness. And one of my favorite quotes is from As You Like It. And the character says, the fool doth think he is wise, but the wise man knows himself to be a fool. So, for all you wise and wonderful, lovely people out there, let's go fool around with some yarn. So, the first thing that I want to share with you is that it's really important for us to be gentle with our yarn and our tools, and we are unable to create beautiful, relaxed fabric through violence. So what I've got here is I have tightened my slip knot so that the loop on my hook is in essence throttling my hook. And as you might have gathered from the fact that I mentioned violence, throttling our hooks is not a good way to treat them. So your yarn should be relaxed. In this instance, it's not, it's taut, tight. And the loops on your hook should also always be relaxed. Right. The other thing to remember is that the loops on your hook should always be on the shaft and not in the throat. If you have a tight loop that you've made in the throat of your hook, it's not only going to be too tight to work into, but it's going to be too small for the stitch that you're trying to make. So you want to keep your loops nice and loose, and whenever you pull up a loop, make sure that a nice loose loop is on the shaft of your hook. My third thought that I wanted to share with you is regarding crochet speed. Now, I haven't slowed down this video. I'm actually crocheting that slowly. And one of the reasons why is not just because if you're rushing your work, you're tending to stress yourself out. It's that when we create stitches slowly and carefully with thought and intention, then we're going to create stitches that are much more likely to be relaxed. Okay, there's 3 things that I am doing here that I want to point out. That if you can do these, it will prevent your chain stitches from tightening. So the first is the fact that I pinch the chain stitch that I've just made between my thumb and forefinger, and this protects the stitch. Chain stitches are the only stitches that are interlocking, in the sense that if one chain stitch tightens up, the ones before and after it also start to get tighter. So while you're making a chain stitch, if you want to ensure that the process of making a stitch doesn't tighten up the stitch you've already made, if you pinch that stitch between your thumb and forefinger, then it will prevent it from tightening. So that's the first point. The second is that, okay, when I have pinched the chain stitch that I just made, before I pull my yarn through the loop on my hook, I pull down on the loop on my hook to make sure that it is much larger than it was before. This larger, more relaxed loop in turn results in a larger, more relaxed chain stitch. The third thing is when I pull the loop, pull the yarn through the loop on my hook, I then pull up on the loop so that even when I first make it, I'm making sure that it is larger and more relaxed. So I'll just show you that right now. So I've yarned over, and now I'm going to pull up a loop. I'm going to make sure that the loop is on the shaft of my hook, and I'm pulling it up a little bit as I make it. So pulling it up. Hopefully you can see that. So while I make the rest of the foundation chain, I want to quickly review the 5 points that I've covered so far, and then return and reiterate the 6th. So point 1 is to make sure that your loops are never tight around your hook. Point 2 is that you never want your loops to be in the throat of your hook, or to make your stitches in the throat of your hook. The third point, and this is specifically in relation to chain stitches, you want to pinch each stitch that you've made as you're making the subsequent chain stitch, so that you protect the stitches that you've made. You want to pull up on the loop that's on your hook at the same time as you pinch that chain stitch that you've already made, and that ensures that you have a nice large relaxed loop on your hook. You want to, as you yarn over and pull up a loop, you want to ensure that you pull up on the loop and don't pull on your yarn, tugging your loop tight. You want to pull up and have a nice relaxed loop that will then go onto the shaft of your hook, and be in the perfect spot for you to make your subsequent stitch. The point that I want to reiterate is the sixth point, which is how crucial it is that you make especially your foundation chain very slowly and deliberately and with a relaxed intent. As the name implies, your foundation chain is the foundation of your fabric. So if it ends up being rushed and too tight, then you are setting yourself up to fail in terms of making your subsequent rows and your project. So this is my foundation chain, and I'm pointing out here a chain stitch in the middle of the foundation chain, which in the old days I would have undone my work and remade that because the chain is not uniform in size, and as part of my personal growth, I make a conscious effort to let go of perfectionism and accept the fact that there are going to be not necessarily mistakes, but there will always be imperfections in my work. Next, I'm going to show you the impact on your stitches if you have loops that are too tight around your hook, if you tug on your yarn and tighten up your loops while you're making stitches. And this is the impact on your stitches while you're making your foundation row or your first row. I'm also going to show you the impact on your fabric when you're making subsequent rows. So the loops that I've got on my hook are too tight around my hook, and the back loop is just on the shaft of my hook, but the front loop is way too far forward, so it's not quite in the throat of my hook, but it's definitely not in the right spot. So these loops are too tight, they're too small, and what I'm going to do next is play the making of these stitches with the background sound intact, because I want you to not just see what it looks like to struggle to make stitches in tight fabric, but to hear what it sounds like when you're trying to fight against your yarn to create a stitch. So hopefully you could see and hear how difficult these stitches were to make. And if you take a look at them after I have crocheted them, there's a couple of things that I want to point out. Unlike the stitches that I made before these ones, the posts or the body of the stitch is scrunched up. They're very tight and they're not relaxed into their correct height. The effect of this is to create those holes underneath the posts of the stitches. So tightness creates holes and disconnection. When we create relaxed stitches, we create relaxed fabric that is connected and has an internal cohesion and no big holes. So I'm going to undo those really taut stitches and redo them in a far more relaxed fashion. So you want to make sure that the loops are on the shaft of your hook and that they're nice and loose, which is what I've got there. You'll notice that I'm using my thumb and forefinger again to pull down on the loops on my hook in order to enlarge them. The other thing that I'm doing, so in addition to making sure that my loops are on the right section of my hook and that they are nice and relaxed, I'm not pulling on my yarn, and all of these things working together ensure that my stitches are nice and relaxed and that my fabric will look good. So I'm just getting to the end of my foundation row, or row 1, and so you can tell that this fabric was made in a relaxed fashion in 2 ways. If my foundation chain had been too tight, then my fabric would be bowing. So my row 1 would be larger than my foundation chain, which would cause my fabric to bend in like a bowing shape, like a bow, in a bow and arrow. So my foundation chain is at the right tension for my fabric. That's good news. The other way to know that my stitches are not too tight is that my fabric will lay flat. Now, depending on the stitch that you're using, this might not always be the case. So, for example, single crochet is a very, very dense stitch, and it's almost impossible for fabric made with regular single crochet to lie flat without blocking. But this is the lemon peel stitch. And so if you have something other than regular single crochet, a good indicator of if your fabric is being made in a really nice, relaxed fashion is it lying flat? What do the yarn strands look like? Do they look taut and tight, or do they look relaxed? What do the stitches themselves look like? Do they look scrunched up, or do they look like they are filling the available space? Are there holes in your work that aren't planned? So obviously we do create holes in our work on purpose in certain patterns, but if we are looking at creating relatively solid fabric, is the fabric itself solid, or is it full of holes? So those are good things to look out for as indicators that if you see these things, that may be as a result of you crocheting too tightly. So I'm now going to do row 2, and I'm going to show you what I showed you before in terms of keeping the loops on your hook too tight, pulling your yarn too tightly. I'm going to show you what that looks like within rows. So here I have yarned over and pulled up a loop. Now my loops are not in the right place on my hook. They're more towards the throat than they are on the shaft, and they're far too tight. So again, the loop that I've made is far too tight around my hook. I can't see any space between the bottom of the hook and the bottom of the loop. The loops should look like little inverted teardrops. And hopefully you can see not only is it making it harder to actually crochet, but the stitches themselves aren't looking correctly formed. So what I'm doing here is in essence working against my yarn, and instead of working with my yarn to create fabric. So what these taut stitches result in are big gaping holes in our fabric. So I left the background sound on this section of the video as well, because I wanted you to hear, hopefully you can hear how quiet it is when you crochet in a relaxed fashion. There's no violence being committed. You're not fighting to create stitches in the first place. The yarn and the hook and your hands and your muscle memory are all working together to create lovely fabric. So this is what it should look and sound like. So my hands are relaxed, my body is relaxed, my mind is relaxed, my yarn is relaxed, and all of those things working together are creating relaxed fabric. There's no tension anywhere, really. There's no holes or disconnection. We are creating fiber that is connected, and it's connected within itself, and we are establishing and confirming the connection that we have with our creation and within ourselves.